And we're going to introduce the first keynote speaker right now.
That's right. And we have next up is Mr. Lawrence Chong, the Group CEO of Consulus, CEO of Design Futures Venture Consulus. Well, Lawrence himself is a Group CEO, and he's also a two-time TED Talk speaker. He's a global thought leader on innovation, change by design, and an economic approach called the economy of communion. So he's a really, really sought-after keynote speaker, and he has spoken in more than 30 cities, such as New York, Shenzhen, Melbourne, etc. Well, you know it, you name it. So let's put our hands together and welcome Mr. Lawrence Chong.
Thank you. Good morning, BNI. How are you? Come on, you can do better, guys. How are you? Okay, it's good to be here. When I started my business 20 years ago, I was introduced to BNI. But of all places, BNI Thailand. That's very interesting, and I met a group of people, but I didn't manage to keep up. And I must say that it always left a good impression in me. The people were genuine and authentic, just like this morning. This energy of you as a family of referral. But more than that, you're not just referring, you're presenting yourself. When you introduce yourself, your business, it's more than just a transaction. It's you. Like what Mac has said, it's you. You present you. And that you is what people see. And I was so happy to listen to your experiences in how you build networks, because this idea of change by design is essentially what we are all doing every single day. And I thought very deeply, what is the gift I can give to you as you welcome me to join you on this very special occasion of the National Conference. And of course, to all our friends, not from Singapore, we welcome you. And I think every single day, as just Mac was sharing just now with your formula, you set off a ripple effect. Every one of you here, your personal journey, what led you here, your stories, your experiences, and it was so interesting for me to see Desmond, Frederick, and I thank Desmond for inviting me, dancing at the very beginning, right, shaking. But that is the ripple effect that you, BNI, generate. Now, why is this ripple effect important? Because you claim as your mission that you are here to change the way business is done, isn't it? You cannot change the way business is done if you're not able to create a ripple effect, a large enough ripple effect. And so I do wish you all the best as you increase your flock or your congregations, as what our GOH has said very clearly. You're like a church, Now, it's very interesting. I serve an organization that believes in creative change. My business, essentially, is to tell the world how Singapore has changed from the smallest of nations to become a global powerhouse. It is extremely unlikely, born in unlikely circumstances. The Singapore way of creative change is what me and my friends do. But more than that, it doesn't belong to Singaporeans alone. And even for the Singaporeans in the room, I don't think you realize there's something magical here. That there are people around the world who are amazed by the Singapore way of growth. And it's something like what Michael mentioned actually just now. It's almost like we didn't prepare the speeches. But he was saying the things that I'm going to talk about, and it's going to be incredible. So when I started the work, and one of the reasons why I went international was, in those days, in the early 2000s, the Singapore government started to give a lot of grants. Now, for folks who are outside of Singapore, you will not realize this, but the Singapore government is extremely generous, very generous. If we need a grant for literally anything in business, you have it. You name it, there is. There was almost $400 million of grants available to SMEs or micro SEs every single year. So you can be the smallest of startup, and you can be the smallest of a mom and pop shop, you will get government support. But there is one problem. As a consultant, you don't know whether your solution is good or simply because there's a grant, that's why they hire you. So it was an existential crisis. I had to get out of Singapore because if I get paid simply because there's a handout by the government, you're not valuable. So I went out with the help of friends. Some of you may know CPG consultants. They design Changi Airport. They do some of our schools and institutions, and they brought us to Pakistan. We did the Benazir Bhutto Airport. We did the Brunei International Airport, so on and so forth. So we left Singapore, we went out to the world. And when I left Singapore, and I shared with people what I wanted to do, which is to build creative movements. You see, when I was growing up in Singapore, in the 80s and the 90s, Singapore was all about making money. But what a lot of people did not realize is Singapore's notion of making money came from purpose, something that what Max said about. It is not without purpose, it is with purpose for our survival, for our growth, for our future. So I told them, Singapore is a city of why, it's a nation of why, because we're not meant to exist. And in Singapore, unity is by design. So what we did was we turned that into a methodology. We studied the impact quantitatively in organizations, how much wealth they generate if they have purpose and unity. And we found that there is a direct correlation effect. And actually, your BNI formula that you were showing just now is a proof that when purpose and unity is together, done intentionally and by design, there is innovation and growth. So that's our business. Now, we are privileged to be serving in the Americas, in Europe, in Asia, in 23 countries. We work with individuals. They can be leaders, professionals. They are looking to find themselves, to use the power of purpose to bring about change. Or organizations, whether they are non-profit, they are for-profit organizations, multinationals, family-owned conglomerates, to cities. And so I'm telling you this because what I'm going to share with you come from that 20 years of journey that I have had the privilege to walk with all my friends globally. And after we have went to many parts of the world, of course, we are now a global family. It's not dominated by Singaporeans. We have Slovakians, Croatians, Italians, Americans, so on and so forth, from Malaysia. One of the things that we are very concerned about, and I think as an entrepreneur, you have to be concerned about as well. Capitalism as it is has to be changed, but not in a way where everyone, is able to just grow. But the problem is that the growth engines of today are getting very, very limited. Singapore, Malaysia, Taiwan, many of the growth economies of the past benefited from an economic system that allowed room for growth. We are now entering an age where capitalism is no longer as healthy and no longer spreading that growth. And that affects all of our businesses. Because for enterprises, whether you're a small company or a large company, you are largely dependent on the system that must work. If a system is not working as well, our businesses are affected. Our referrals will come down. So what Consulus is very concerned about is how to ensure the economy always give room, always give an opportunity for the young person in Jakarta, for the young person in Croatia to grow. If young people cannot find growth, we are all finished. And increasingly, the latest statistics from China itself, the unemployment rate in China is staggering. And the Chinese government is extremely concerned about employment rates among young people. So what we try to do, and this is what we call the Shape the World formula, is we work with individuals, organizations, governments, to look at how to redesign institutions, redesign the impact, redesign the influence, in order to realize a more healthy economy. what we call the economy of communion. So today, you have a very, very important and interesting topic. Better together, connecting borders. But we live in an age where people increasingly don't want to connect. Don't think that they are together, better together. If you are from a certain block, they are saying, hey, we only want to be friends with these guys. No. We only want to be friends with these other guys. This is the problem of today. So your theme is spot on. And when we grow our business, we have to acknowledge these inherent fault lines. These fault lines will affect our business. And these tensions between the great powers are already affecting our growth. And so what you have here in this room, the laughter, the joy, the openness to one another from different parts of the world is increasingly getting stressful. It's not easy to have these kind of friendships. So you should treasure these friendships that you have. This is not common. Globalization has ended. Many experts have said that there is no more globalization. There is all this idea of balkanization of the world. In Southeast Asia, there are huge dramatic shifts in this part of the world. Indonesia is the equivalent of our China. Why? A population of 200 over million, with more than half the population under the age of 35. Now, in Southeast Asia, we have what we call the growth D countries. Why D? Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia. These three countries dominate the young people of Southeast Asia. And when you have young people, what do? They need to spend money. When you have young people, they need to buy houses. And when you have young people, they need to get jobs, they will start business. And I think BNI is very active in all three, right? Right, Mac? And this is a fact that Southeast Asia now is one of the best looking blocks in the entire global south. Across the Latin America, you have Africa, which is coming up very nicely. Southeast Asia is really the place to be in this part, in the whole world. Now, the other challenge is that all of us here, in some form or way, are going to be impacted by the $400 billion investment that is going into AI. Now, in our language, when we follow the money trail, things happen. Why? Because if you spend so much money on the pig, hoping that you will fly, it has to fly. You know, recently, Elon Musk rebranded Twitter to be X. And a lot of marketing experts, okay, I know the business of marketing as well. Oh, it's a bad idea. You know, it will fail, it will die, you know, because Twitter is such a great brand. Guys, calm down. The guy has spent $45 billion to buy Twitter, he'll make it work. Right? Because when you spend so much money on a pig, you have to find a way to put it on the flight. Right? So this is the truth of business. So likewise, when there's so much money spent on something like this, it would have to fly. And all of us here have to consider how AI will positively impact us or negatively impact us. During COVID-19, we were hired by governments, we work with governments to study if COVID ends, where is the future economy? And we found that these four aspects, what we call FEDS, food security, environment, data, and space, each one of them will be a $1 trillion economy business. Each one of them has already become a $1 trillion economy business. And this is something that is significant because not every single aspect of the future economy will grow. We need food, but not just normal food. We need to explore all ways of growing food. Because, for example, and Michael alluded to this, and I really have a lot of heart for what he did between the relationship. And give Michael a round of applause. I know exactly what he meant when he knows the Russians are not easy to convince. You know, they're what we call highbrow people, right? And they know their stuff. And so what Michael did to bridge that is incredible. Now, because of the crisis that's going on in Ukraine, food security is the #1 problem right now in affecting all of us in terms of inflation. Now, in Singapore, fortunately, there is a lot more forward planning on food security because we are a small nation. But also, even then, even though we are a small nation, but there was a lot more forward planning, so we are able to buffer against it. But many countries, you talk about entire African continent, the reason why the African governments went to Russia recently in order to try to broker a peace between Russia and Ukraine is because food security is a major problem. And food security, dear friends, for the next 20 years will be a problem for a 10 billion population planet because we're going to be 10 billion very soon. Now, these better together connecting borders, easier said than done. Talk only. So when I started, right, and I'm sure all of you have some similar experiences, so we are here exchanging some notes. I thought that as a good Singaporean boy, I should ask my government, how can I expand overseas? So when I was president of the Designers Association Singapore, which is today the Design Business Chamber, we asked the trade office introduce us to partners in China. And what happened was, they introduced us to such good partners, they weren't interested in our services, they wanted to sell us houses. So that didn't work. Then I thought, as a young consultant, I should talk to a senior consultant in one of the Big Four. And the Big Four guy said to me, you have to pay me good money. At that time, I didn't know BNI, so I have to pay good money. And he said, you pay me good money, I will give you business. Okay, good. So he's a partner, partner of a big four firm, very proud. And you told me 3 things. Lawrence, you must fly business class. Okay, fly business class. Second, you must stay in a good hotel. Okay, stay in a good hotel, I did. And third, I will help you close the job. So I did all that. I went with him to India because I believe in India as a market. We took the business class, we stayed at a fancy hotel. He came with me. And at the end of the day, when we closed the deal, the value of the deal is the same as working for an SME in Singapore. And I said, dude, how does it square up? I paid big money, but the value is the same, right? So after I failed to get help from the government agencies of Singapore, after I failed to get help from a senior consultant in the Big Four, I stopped. I decided to find my own way. And I must say, over 20 years, I have different chances to meet the head of state and everything. Strangely now, I haven't had the chance to meet the president of Singapore, right? But because I've been out there, all this while, yeah? So there's something that I realized, and this is something that I understood, and it was in a conversation with another entrepreneur. And I thought this would be a great gift for you today, because all of you are entrepreneurs, all of you are your own champions of your life, right? Now, what is your business model? Are you wood? Are you fire? Are you water? I just want you to picture, what is your business model? Now, wood takes time, it's valuable, it cannot simply move. But once it takes root, there's a lot of value. I know this because I'm working on a project to plant 10 million empress trees in Malaysia. It's not easy, yeah? And this is my tree. So my team, in a year, it shoots up to this height. Right? It's the fastest growing tree, largest carbon capture tree, right? It's for sustainability, carbon credit, so on and so forth. So what do I mean by wood? If your business model is that, one example is property, real estate. You find a good plot, you're good with your right sizing, gross revenue per square foot. You are wood. You have to grow. You make your returns, yeah, if you're wood. Okay, fire. Some people like this business model. It has to grow very fast, raise a lot of money. Bucket loads of money, like my friend in New York would say, buckets load. We need buckets load of money, okay? All right? To burn down an existing forest, to build a whole new empire. But you have to accept, you have to burn cash to win. So what is the example here? Who knows what is a fire business model? Anybody want to guess? Our dear friend. So they bought Transcap, right, recently? They're going to go through the Transcap. But they raised a lot of money. So who else is in this business? Amazon. Amazon, they burn cash, they grew fast, built the hub and spoke, everything and so on. Yeah? So fire. Now, water. If your business model is water, it has to be audacious, flexible, to flow into new areas, be quick to adapt. And the interesting thing about water is from a humble stream, it becomes a mighty ocean. So who is water? Any Singapore companies you know who is water? Anyone? Huh? I've lost. I've gone already. I mean, I really pity the team. I know the team. They were really unfortunate, right? So that's another long story. Yeah, no. Singapore Airlines. Why? It is not normal for a city-state to even have an airline. It should not, by logic, you should not by logic have an airline. And you should not by logic, because we do cities project. To qualify for a large international airport, you need a population size, what we call domestic population size. We don't have that. But it's audacious. It's water. Yeah? And today, of course, we know, is still the world's most profitable airline. You can fly, but you must make money. Water. Now, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because something that I learned from young, I was very impressed and very inspired by this Italian lady. Her name was Chiara Lubick. She won the UNESCO Peace Prize. And when I was following her philosophy, because her belief is to build a united world, to build a united world with people and nations. And she ever said this, make yourself one with the other. Now, if you look at that concept, it's pretty neat and pretty interesting, because water also means if somebody likes tea, and if you're water, you can be tea. If someone likes coffee, same water, you can offer coffee. Yeah? So that is something that's very interesting. And there was one experience I had in Shanghai that really struck me. What happened was, you know, the design industry, we were working on the Shanghai World Expo. And and when China hosted the World Expo, it's a military operation, you know. You know why? Because China is so huge. Even the visitors have to be guarded by military people to walk in a column of 1,000. Because they have to limit entry to the expo. They can easily flood the expo with 40 million people. No problem. But it was curious. Why would the Chinese want to learn from Singapore? Why? At the top of this pavilion that the design industry was involved in, there was one video. And it was a video of Mr. Lee Kuan Yew talking about water. At that time, China was struggling with a lot of polluted water. There was a lot of problems. Even now today, one of the biggest billionaires in China is water. He has a water business. Yeah? But just to say that the Chinese, in their thousands and the millions, were interested to learn Mr. Lee Kuan Yew's view about how it transforms Singapore in terms of water security and filtration. And that's fascinating, because I had a reflection when I saw that video. This is our trump card, you know. This is our trump card, because you look at it in truth, the entire growth story of Singapore is a water dragon. We make money out of water. We are a strategic entrepot trade. Goods come, goods go. Water security, everything is related to water. And I'd like to tell you a little bit of this so that it's useful for you. How? So I decided I'm not going to ask any government agency to help me because they are hopeless. I decided to learn from the Singapore growth story and how Singapore became a global powerhouse. And I call it the 3 ways of being water. First, be water. Second, be a water dragon. Third, be a reservoir. Yeah? So this is something that I, you know, to a very, very honest reflection, I was just looking back, how did Singapore make it? So first, you know, water can appear very humble. But water is actually cutting through all the time. What Michael did was exactly that. He was this humble stream, Nobody bother. Alamak, you're a small stream. You know, in Chinese, it's a very, very beautiful language because in Chinese, there are more beautiful ways to say a stream, you know. And Michael said, no. I'm a small stream with the potential to be a big river. Useful for you, yeah? So what happened is, when you want to be water, first you need to 打成一片, as Chinese say. Be one with them. What Michael did, Michael was one with the Russians. That is the first thing. Second, be useful. That's what Michael did. Again, we didn't coordinate. I can tell you this, right? I was just listening to him. Third, be humble. This is the Singapore doctrine, you know, for the foreign service. You cannot talk Singapore is very good and all these things, or we are always trying to be helpful. We are a small country. Yeah? This is the aspect of water. Now, a tiny city-state, not even the size of, the Warren, a normal country, Singapore gets invited to G20. What is G20? 20 of the most powerful economies in the world. And Singapore is always there, the tiny little red dot. So being small, like, if you have a small business, let me tell you this. Don't think yourself as small. Don't. Because if you say you are small, you will always be small. Don't. Think of yourself as water. You can flow. From a drop, you can create an ocean. That's the idea of Singapore itself. It's the whole concept, right? And that's why Mr. Deng Xiaoping came here and he was stunned. This society could transform housing, give a better quality of life for its people. How can a small nation do something that China should have done it 1,000 times? Right? So remember the famous phrase Mr. Deng Xiaoping said to Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, what you do here, we will do 1,000 times. And they did. Yeah? Now, when we started expanding overseas, same. One of these projects, this is a National Bank of Brunei. We never said, in Singapore, we do this, we do that. We never said. What we did was, whenever we went to Brunei and we worked with the bank, we said, Bruneians, you are very good. You are amazing. You have a unique culture. You are a friendly people. Literally, if you are in Brunei, right, if you want to cross the road, the cars will just stop for you. And you cross the road anytime. If you go into any coffee shop in Brunei, people will just say, come and join us. How are you? That's their greeting. You know, in Singapore, when I have meetings, Singapore, we don't have a culture of hospitality, Sometimes, we say in our language, no water. If you go to a meeting in Brunei, they give you coffee, tea, all the kueh come out nicely decorated. Yeah? Singapore, you don't have that. Even you go government, worst. It's like interrogation, no water. But there, so we understood, we made ourselves one. Then we made ourselves useful. I had a very interesting conversation with the ambassador of Singapore to Brunei. And he said to me, we are strategic friends. We are not there to extract anything from Brunei, but we are strategic friends. And that stayed in my mind. So how can we make the National Bank of Brunei like DBS Bank? That's our idea. But never at any one time telling them we are better than you. Always telling them, you can be great because you are already great because you didn't know you are already there. Yeah? So same, now the opposite. When we went to Indonesia, because Indonesia is big brother. So everywhere I go, I will say, you are the big brother. What can I do for you, big brother? I say, okay, young brother, you are young, you can run, I need this. You have to be like that because they are a big country. And again, for a big country, you cannot say Singapore is this, Singapore is that. It's irrelevant because our size compared to their size is nothing. Yeah? So when we are doing projects in Indonesia, like size like this, I was explaining to a European consultant. He said, oh, in Europe, the government has to do this, the government has to do that. I said, this is Indonesia. The government let the family companies run the whole town. Yeah? So it's a whole different picture. But you imagine the size of Toa Payoh in Singapore, that is the scale that they are building 10 times. Because Indonesia, Jakarta alone, they add 2 million people per year to Jakarta. That's the size, of the growth that they have. Now, second, how do we become a water dragon? Water is very interesting. When you're a water dragon, it means water is always purposeful. Because if you are wood, if you are fire, it's not purposeful. You realize that? Wood, you grow straight. That's it. It's not directional. Direction, you go the other way. Very bad for trees, huh? You know? Fire, non-stop. That's why we have wildfires. The Canada is facing wildfires. Thank God we didn't have the wildfires recently because we were waiting for haze. It didn't happen. I think the Indonesian governments did a very, very good job, you know, and also the Malaysian governments. There's not enough tanks for the effort because it's really not easy. It's a huge piece of land. Huh? So water is always purposeful, never non-purposeful. And second, water is unique. It can turn into many unique shapes, and water is creative. So you can see ice sculptures done in a very dramatic way because you can form water into almost anything, works of art. It can be huge iceberg over time due to different conditions of change. Yeah? And a tiny stream can suddenly flood plains, create a lot of chaos if it wants to. So never underestimate water. Because water can surprise you, water can inspire you, and water will show you the way. Because water always leads to the ocean. Water always connects with other water bodies. So how did Singapore do it? That's why in Singapore, nothing can be done without purpose. Nothing. You know, my friend from Brazil is an architect. When he came to Singapore, he got shocked. He said that we Brazilians, architects, pride ourselves as being very purposeful in our architecture. Because, you know, if you go to Brasilia, their capital, they pride themselves with the brilliance of Brazilian architecture. But he said, we lose to Singapore. Even the toilet, your toilets are designed with purpose. Your streets, and he was asking us, how come this is a public street and you have very, very clear trees, pedestrian walk, and everything? Everything is exceptionally designed. So even the shopping mall for the airport, we have to put a waterfall there because we have very little space and it has to grow. And that's why, as a Singapore brand, you have to be unique, you have to be purposeful because we are a small country. We don't have enough malls for you. So Old Chang-kee in London looks like that. On the top is our food court in New York, very near to Times Square. And guess how much is the chicken rice? So for friends from overseas, please eat the chicken rice in Singapore. It's value for money. Anyone want to guess? How much for a plate of chicken rice in New York? Huh? $16? Okay, our Singaporeans are very good with pricing. Huh? $19 USD. I bought it, by the way, no choice. Because I brought my American friends that you have to eat this. Yeah, it's good, and it's good, yeah. So the Hainan Jones and reviews by the New York Times. Very fascinating. Huh? But this is the Singapore story. This is what I mean by water dragon. We have to be purposeful, we have to be unique, we have to be creative, or else we cannot survive in this new world. Now, when I was in New York and I started the business in New York, the key is to not tell the New Yorkers that we are small, because they know we are small. No point. But to tell the New Yorkers what we can bring. And what I said was, New York is a place for global business. Singapore is the New York of Asia. So we are the same. We are not different. And they bought it. So that's how we have to, without fear, we have to focus on purpose. We cannot be intimidated at any time by a greater power. Never. Yeah? So that's why when people invite me to speak in Croatia, I just tell the purpose of Singapore. I just tell the story of Singapore as it is. And that purpose is the one that's greater than the sum of anything. Now, this is a gift that all of us will realize this, and this is something very interesting. Be a reservoir. Why is reservoir so important for Singapore? For friends from overseas, you have to understand that because Singapore is so small, we always needed water from Malaysia. And it's a security concern for us. If one day our friends and relatives in Malaysia don't like us, and they turn off the tap, we are in trouble. That's why we are always very good friends with the Sultan of Johor and the Crown Prince. You know, we want the friendship very much. But anyway, from independence in 1965, the Singapore government has made it their personal mandate, especially Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, to be water independent. So what you are seeing here, this picture, is our largest freshwater reservoir. Dammed up at the end, what we call the Marina Barrage. And actually one of the largest in the world ever. Artificially created to collect fresh water for Singapore. Now, why am I saying you this for business? Huh? At a certain point in your life, you know, we all start like this. Our years in business, career is 10, 10, 10. First 10, find a way to figure out what to do. Second 10, strengthen our network. Third 10, we must establish ourselves and connect with the world. Fourth 10, we must be so well connected, we have a basin of network, friends, business that can generate income and cash flow so that we can last another 4, 10, 10, 10, 10. You understand? Because by the time you reach 50, everything must be done. Everything must be ready. Because now, especially if you are Singaporean, when we work with the Ministry of Health, we understood one thing. It's hard to die in Singapore. Because there's a general hospital within 5 minutes. So you can't die. If you got stroke, ambulance come. Got heart attack, ambulance come. If you're out of Singapore, God bless you. But you can't die in Singapore because the government has made it its priority to put general hospitals within 5 minutes of every living Singaporean. Yeah? So just to say that you will live long, you know. So the average age for women, 98 it will be. For men, shorter a bit, 92. That's what the government is planning for. That's why all the plans that the government is accelerating is to prepare for sustainable silver living. That's the keyword. So the reservoir, why I'm talking about the analogy of reservoir, because after a while, at the age of 50, you should have your own reservoir. Your reservoir of friends, your reservoir of connections, your reservoir that you can spend. Yeah, this is very important. Singapore is the tiniest of nations in Southeast Asia, but we attract more than half the foreign direct investment. I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, but simply because Singapore has built its trust. Just now Mac was saying, how do you profit? When do you know you profit from it? It comes as a sequence. Yeah, it's not a formula, but you have to understand that it comes as a sequence. So this part, first, you've got to be credible. Yeah, you see, I didn't see your BNI slides. You have to be credible. Second, you must be inclusive. Don't make the non-Singaporeans feel like they don't belong here. You have to understand that. The Singapore formula is everyone can come. Yeah? The moment Singapore starts to say, hey, you're not Singaporean enough, out of here, we are finished. Because our wealth is literally grown by how well we attract the water to us. And Singapore make it because we are always one pivot ahead. What is one pivot ahead? Last time people don't have oil and gas, we have oil and gas. Last time people didn't have chemicals industry, we have chemicals industry. Last time there was not enough of a financial center. In this part of the world, there was only Hong Kong. Singapore became a financial center, right? So there's always one pivot ahead. Now, I am not campaigning for candidate Taman. I am not his assenter. But I just want to say that Singaporeans are so credible now that there was only one Asian name proposed when they were talking about replacing the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, and it was Mr. Taman. And we have many other Singaporeans now serving in the United Nations. Yesterday, there was a great news. There was one Singaporean appointed to the climate change scientist, you know. Climate change scientist, a Singaporean, a small country, yeah? So we should be proud of ourselves. So small is okay, but you must make small like a ruby, you know, a very shiny gem. It must be a gemstone. Then, because I've been involved in interreligious dialogue for almost 20 years, this is Singapore's strength. And according to Pew Research, Singapore is the most religiously diverse nation on earth. So what does it mean? Every culture, every race, you're welcome here. And this is important. Then do you all know that Singapore now has a thriving space industry? Strange, huh? We don't have land, huh? But we have people raising money, investing to launch rockets, you know. Micro rockets, they call it. And this is how Singapore pivot ahead. Always one step ahead in order to be relevant and useful. So even for us, that's how I understood. We need to, for a company like mine, Consulus, I must have my own event. I cannot depend on the event of other consultants. I must generate something. But to share the mission. That's why I created Shape the World Summit. And this year we did it in Sarawak, and the premier of Sarawak was the keynote speaker, because you must be credible. If as a smaller player, you're not credible, it's just like what Michael did. Hey, we are a small country, but we can influence. We must believe we can influence. If you cannot influence, we are finished. Then, in order to make Consulus, a Singaporean company, more inclusive, we opened up the chairmanship by election from all around the world. So this was my chairman from the US. Just to say we are so inclusive, he didn't know that giving me a clock is not a good thing for Chinese. Song Zong, we say, But just to say that we are so inclusive, I accepted the clock because in American culture it's a good thing, to give time, and everything, right? But just to say that this is how you make, so that Consulus is not just a Singaporean company, it's Singaporean founded, but it's a global firm, right? So you have to be that open. Then this year, we looked at the entire consulting industry. We foresee that the consulting industry will be wiped out by half if generative AI comes into being. You don't need to hire consultants. Why you hire consultants for what? Don't hire them. Because they ask you to pay a lot of money like I did. I pay a consultant a lot of money. I still don't get business. Right? I should have joined BNI. Right? So the thing is that we pivot towards this year, towards personal development. Because we have been doing that for CEOs, and now we convert that whole process for every individual, and we launched our first product this year. So something that you have to think about, how generative AI can impact your business and your future. And this is the methodology that has already been deployed in many MNC companies around the world. We call it Purpose Core. It's how you define your own purpose with your ability, your own influence, your own differentiation. Until you know yourself, you cannot influence and shape the future. So last year, I also pivoted on my own reservoir. I understood I have been in consulting for 20 years. I know people, I can manage fund, I can raise money. So I started designing future venture with my Sarawakian partner. It's only focused on one thing, the upside of Sarawak. That means all the investment from here go in to Sarawak in the green economy. Because in Sarawak is the same size as Peninsular Malaysia, but they only have 23 persons per square kilometer. Very low footprint, and it's 70% powered by renewable energy. So this June, we launched our 200 megawatt green data center that we are going to build pretty soon, right? So just to say that when you look at your life, when you reach your fifth 10 year, you already should be able to consolidate your reservoir. It will naturally happen because you have been growing, you have been moving like water. Yeah, this is our 200 megawatt data center that we are building in Borneo. So, dear friends, my hope and my gift, and thank you for welcoming here today, is to learn from the Singapore growth story. I hope it's been useful to you. Remember, be water, be a water dragon, be a reservoir. See you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. And another big round of applause, louder applause for Lawrence. Thank you so much for your keynote speech, sir. Thank you.